we, like the rest of the country, have to get on board with understanding that having a broader and more diverse workforce makes us more capable. So when we're either working with people at their most vulnerable, for example after a motor vehicle accident, whether it's about explaining to people what they need to do to prepare and survive for a bushfire, whether it's about having the right sort of skills mix within incident management teams, you get that through better diversity.
Diversity can be seen as just being politically correct or whatever. That's a cop-out. It makes a better workplace, but we're more engaging with the community these days, getting out there, speaking to the community. If we don't look like them and know how they're thinking, we can't do that effectively.
Capability and operational effectiveness are critical to an effective contemporary military. Our review found that the ADF was not building a workforce whose skills match the realities of modern warfare. With an increasing focus on technology and problem solving, modern military workplaces are complex and evolving. Gone are the military typecasts of soldier, pilot, sailor. Gone are the sole requirements of manual skill or physical strength. Rather, today's Defence Force demands a breadth of skills that include adaptability, strategic thinking, working in small teams with minimal direction, remote work, intelligence gathering, and outreach to local population, which in particular is work where women are essential. Without a sustainable workforce strategy, one that embraces 100% of the talent, without a wider range of skills to engage in future theatres of war, cyber warfare, urban warfare, counter-insurgency, over time, our Defence Force will become less and less effective. It must seek out variety rather than sameness if it is to continue to function effectively. And to then retain these employees, to see a return on the considerable investment they make to each and every one. The ADF must adapt to the realities of modern workplaces. Regardless of demographic, today's potential personnel, particularly those from younger generations, are looking for more than just a job for life. So flexibility, varied opportunity, individual career paths, the ability to balance work and family and a personal life, and a visible commitment by leaders that sexual harassment, sexual abuse and bullying won't be tolerated. These factors, more than monetary considerations, are what drive potential employees into the arms of competitors and what Defence must offer if it is to stem the loss of valued personnel. So it's imperative that unacceptable behaviour that demeans and degrades women, indeed that demeans and degrades anyone who does not conform to the defence stereotype of the alpha male, the so-called warrior, is stamped out. It is imperative that concepts such as mateship and loyalty go hand in hand with inclusiveness and respect, that they don't mean allowing your mates to get away with poor behaviour. For as we found, unacceptable behaviour, and especially sexual misconduct and abuse, it ruins lives, it divides teams, and ultimately it undermines capability. And it's imperative that each of the services create an environment where people who have suffered abuse, harassment or bullying feel safe and supported to come forward and know that action will be taken when they report something. So at the heart of these issues is leadership. Leadership certainly at the most senior level, but also leadership that goes right through the ranks. We've often said that those leaders who have the day-to-day contact with the most junior members are the cultural ambassadors. What they say and do matters. They have the power to create a positive or negative culture, one that is inclusive or one that's divisive.
What was your first step in the cultural change process, and how long do you think that cultural change will take?
I think the first step is that leadership have to take it on board. And I think what's important is actually communicating the case for change right down the ranks. So to those middle ranks, you know, what I call before the cultural ambassadors. And it's not just about being nice to women, because as soon as you say that, people will turn off. You know, you'll get the comments about, you know, this is you're a do-gooder or whatever. It's about capability. It's about, you know, the future sustainability of this force.
There will be a backlash, okay? Let's just face that. Anything you do to progress diversity, there's going to be people that are very uncomfortable. And it's not just men. Senior women in Air Force were the people that were most angry about any sort of diversity initiatives targeting women, because in our organisation we fight really hard to be one of the boys, to be accepted as an equal contributor. We don't want to be special needs groups. The biggest thing was getting the people on board who are the most adverse. If you can get people on board who are the most adverse to any sorts of gender changes or any sort of diversity programs, you're halfway there. And strong leadership and leadership commitment, again, is phenomenally important. And also communicating the operational case for change. You don't want to set out the message, we're just doing this because we need to be nice to women. It's a feminist agenda. The government wants us to have more women, we have to. No, no, no. If you make it about operational success and capability, people are much more accepting of the argument. And I would also say that none of this is quick or easy. You know, we talked about 8-year-old children that already have a strong social stereotype about firefighting. So changing that, it's not going to happen by itself. There has to be targeted measures and there has to be a commitment.
Women can actually change the conversation and change the topic and actually get men to talk about things they normally may not because they don't think of it. Things like flexible workplaces, things like part-time work, things like maternity leave, things like family care leave, things like how can we balance work and life. So I think they can bring subjects and topics that perhaps the whole workplace will benefit from, but women tend to bring those topics to the table quicker than men do. But once they're on the table, you'll find that everybody will benefit from that discussion.
As a firefighter, I bring my own individual traits and skill set to the job, nothing to do with being female. And the girls that I've spoken to and work with that want to be in their job, I also think I recognise in them skills and traits that, again, have nothing to do with being female. So when someone applies for the job and you look at them as being good for that position, do you think there are specifically female traits, or do you think each individual brings their own traits and that is what should be focused on, getting that diversity rather than a female trait?
We know when we do our recruitment that in certain parts of the process, so in the PAT process, the men get through at higher rates. But we also know that during the interview process, the women get through at higher rates. They show a high level of maturity and job readiness. We also know that when we look at psychometric testing, they test better on EQ elements, on the people-based skills. So there are gender differences. We're doing exactly the same. We're looking for a well-rounded person, but women have certain strengths in certain areas and men have strengths in different areas.
Human rights was regarded as a business, as a service to the public, not bleeding hearts and warm and fuzzy ideas, but actually indicators that are measurable and performance that is audible. And having a culture is a pattern of assumptions, shared values, and it means that human rights are considered and respected in all functions, developing, evaluating policies, services and programs. So it's throughout the whole operationalisation of a service. Leaders can create the environment that determines whether their organisation has a positive culture, one where unacceptable behaviour is minimised, where reporting is encouraged and where complainants are supported. And it really concerns me where people feel that they're not safe to even report within an internal organisation, let alone an external agency like a Human Rights Commission, fearing victimisation and isolation, career death, and this notion of maintaining mateship and team loyalty, otherwise you're dogging on your colleagues. It's an Australian value that has gone too far when it results in this treatment of women.
Any notion that Australian fire services have made progress in terms of gender diversity is simply rhetoric. I had another word starting with B, ending with T. But And I'm guilty. I'm guilty as charged. And this is something I'm passionate about. I've made no progress and I'm really embarrassed about it. And I'm at the end of my career, but going to have a red hot go and turn it around and not put up with the naysayers. Now, what's holding women back? You can tell me more than I can, but I'll say it because it's probably good to hear a bloke say it and say, hey, we sort of get it. That relentless scrutiny. Men don't get that. I've said it. The big, fat, unfit men who smoke too much and drink too much, we stick them on the back of the pump and look after them. But, let's try and catch one of that other kind out so that we can say they're all no good and then we're heroes again. Firefighting is so caught up. It's a sociological construct for men and it's about their masculinity and heroism. And so if a woman can do it, well, doesn't that detract from my masculinity? So I've got to defend it at all costs. And I heard a ridiculous thing today about a pay claim saying we can't have flexible work hours because, the team go into all these life-threatening things and, they've got to be tight as a thing, so you can't let anyone not work the standard roster. Well, do the math. How many calls are automatic fire alarms and how many calls are actual fires? Let's have a reality check. And I can work with any firefighter. I've worked on fires in Los Angeles City, New York City, Barcelona. If you're trained and you know your stuff, you can fit in anywhere. My pet hate is senior officers in a room like this saying, well, you guys and you blokes, and I had women, City of Sydney last night, talking about that. They said, oh, we don't mind, we know what they mean. No, bugger that. It sends a message, this is a boys' club and you're not actually welcome. We tolerate you. So language is so important, particularly from senior people. So I'll pull them up now. It's like all these subliminal messages. And people like me don't even realise, but we've got to be told. And what comes through in the research is that women don't want to rock the boat. The biggest opponents to having quotas or affirmative action are women firefighters.
We've fallen into our own cultural trap. I did it this way, I did it the hard way. Why can't they do it the hard way? We've set that culture up ourselves, and that's what it's individual. It's got to come back to each of us to stop that mentality and pull it up when we see it.
Why is it so difficult for us? Police have done it. Ambulance have done it. The military are currently doing it with all the complexities of armed services. So why is it hard for us? What should I do? What should Greg do? What should all the other commissioners or chief officers do? How do we do it? Well, clearly we talk to staff. We might actually send an email that's pretty hard-hitting, or we might get out to stations and actually talk to them and explain what we're trying to achieve. Firefighters generally are a reasonable bunch of people, and if you explain to them in terms that they understand where we want to go and how we need them to achieve our objectives and to be part of that journey, most of them will buy in. We've got to organise respect, equity, diversity training. We've got to provide values and standards training sessions to all of our people. It's a bit that supportive leadership model. If we don't provide the education and the training and set our expectations, then how do we expect people to get there? We need to do the same with equity and diversity. What should the government do? So they've got to provide the strategic direction. Yep, that's a no-brainer. No point providing strategic direction without providing the dollars to be able to achieve that strategic intent.